this fantastic opportunity that we have today. I want to begin by first thanking everyone for the continued partnership that we've enjoyed over these last 11 months as we connected and bolstered our collective work to improve college access and persistent supports in the wake of COVID. And we've all greatly benefited from the contributions of this group and have really built a community here to share and learn. And in that spirit, and with your feedback in mind, Carrie, LaVerne, myself, and the leaders of CAPS have been pushing forward with opportunities for us to hear from the experts who are living with and working on transition supports, persistence and completion realities, and career and workforce development connections. So today's agenda, after our welcome introductions, we'll have a facilitated conversation between LaVerne Srinivasan and Chancellor Matos Rodriguez. And then around the 12:40-ish mark, we'll have a Q&A as well. And then from 1 to 1:30, it'll be a CAPS debrief conversation. We'll mute everyone so we can focus on the conversation. On that note, thank you so much for all the amazing questions you shared in advance, which will form the basis of the conversation. And then please feel free to put your other questions in the chat, and Carrie and I will monitor. So be ready to ask questions when we pivot to the Q&A, and we will open up to folks so you can unmute and have a debrief afterwards. Again, I'm going to turn the mic over to the fantastic Peter Sloan so he can introduce our guest of honor, and then LaVerne will pick it up from there.
Thanks, Farhad. I've known Philo a fair amount of time, and it's a great honor to have him here. Philo, I shared with Philo kind of a list of what foundations are here. Actually, more than I shared on the list with you, Philo. But the one silver lining I think of the pandemic has been that foundations have collaborated in ways that I think someone has their background noise. Anyway, collaborated in ways they may not have, or they certainly didn't before. And I think that's a tribute really to LaVerne and Farhad and others. As I said, Phil, many of us on this call know each other. There are people here I can see from the states of Texas and Washington and California and all in between who are all interested in and quite frankly major funders of post-secondary education. As I said, it's an honor for us to have you here. I don't need to tell you too much about Philo's background other than maybe one quick story. It tells you a little bit about him, how wise and savvy he is. I think he is the only, I didn't spend a lot of time looking, but I think he is the only CUNY chancellor who actually ran both a community college, CUNY Community College, and a senior college. He may be the only chancellor of any college system in the country to have done so. And that really gives him a unique perspective on so many of the issues that we wrestle with as funders. So my one quick story, which tells you a fair amount about, I think, about Philo's wily ways, is we were having an issue trying to get a program off the ground. And it was an issue that was meeting some opposition within CUNY. The parties couldn't even agree on when they would meet or whether they would meet. And so Philo made the suggestion, you may not even remember this, that why don't I just pick a date, schedule the meeting, and schedule it in his conference room at CUNY Central. And so I did that. And of course, everyone assumed that that meant that they were being summoned by the chancellor. Of course, they weren't. Philo didn't even show up to the meeting. But it was such an innovative way of thinking about it that no one balked. Everyone showed up and the program got done. Being the CUNY chancellor is, for those of you who are not New York funders or New Yorkers, it is, it's like herding cats. If you know anything about New York politics, you would understand that 52% of the funding for CUNY comes from the governor, and 14% comes from the city. The governor and the mayor don't talk to each other on anything anyway. So it's a real balancing act to be the chancellor of these 19 schools. One other fact, just so you all know this, and their numbers can be debated, but somewhere between north of 70% of students who graduate from New York City public high schools go to CUNY. So, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One is they have some great schools. The other is it's very cost effective. Between Pell and TAP, you can essentially go to CUNY for free if you qualify. Great honor to have you, Philo. These people ask tough questions, and I've asked you a bunch of tough questions over many years myself. So I don't know.
Why change a winning game, right?
Hey, you know, it's all right. It's okay. I know you can handle it. So LaVerne or Farad, that's
Thanks,
all.
Peter. All right, over to you, LaVerne. LaVerne, I think we're having issues with your audio.
Oh, can you hear me now, Chancellor?
Perfectly.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Terrific. Chancellor, I'll say that again. Thank you so much for being here, making time for us. I know you have, as Peter noted, a very busy schedule, herding the cats and making progress for our students. I'm going to start a little bit big picture and then dive in to a little bit more specific questions. For those, as Peter noted, there are folks on the phone, funders from across the country. So just as a quick reminder that, CUNY, as you know, obviously was founded in 1847 and has 11 senior colleges, 7 community colleges, for those on the call, spread across 5 boroughs and serving at least 500,000 students and awarding 55,000 degrees a year. That's a significant undertaking. And what's particularly compelling is that CUNY ends up propelling almost 6 times as many low-income students into the middle class and beyond as all the Ivy League colleges combined. 80% of the university's graduates stay in the city. So I want to focus in on this point of the university essentially preparing many of the people who become the lifeblood of the city, economic, civic, and cultural life. And so as the pandemic hit us last March, Chancellor, I know you moved quickly to get the university to be in a position to respond and support its students with, the 50,000 course selections that you have. You made sure that the students had the technology they needed. You later launched the Chancellor's Emergency Relief Fund to support students. Bring us up to date. It's February 2021. We're almost a year into this pandemic. Let's start broad and give us an update from your perspective on where things are as you see them at CUNY right now for the state of both the university and its students.
Well, again, thank you, LaVerne, and thank you, Peter, for first suggesting that I talked to this great group, and thank you all for your work and your commitment to higher education. And I know that many here are representatives from foundations that support CUNY, right, and supported CUNY in the past. So thank you for that, and also for the work in higher ed. And thank you, Peter, for telling people that I convene meetings that I don't show up to. It's a phenomenal way to really build respect and rapport for the people here that don't know me. But having said that, great to be here. So let me just say a couple of things about where we are, and obviously I want this to be as interactive as I can. And I know some of you here are more familiar with CUNY, who are part of the work that we do than others. But I mean, it is interesting, right, that we keep approaching semesters in which uncertainty continues to be the norm. Tomorrow I have my monthly meeting with all the presidents. And if I showed you the list of questions that we're going to tackle, And the assumption from the president that we have more information than they do about a whole range of things, right? Where are we going to be with the vaccines in the fall? Are the same rules for social distancing and masks will continue? Would it be mandatory, because we're a public institution, that the students need to be vaccinated? Would it be mandatory that the faculty and staff are vaccinated? If that's the case, how are we going to do it? If not, how are we going to deal with people who don't feel safe to be coming to campus? We've been mostly, about 2% of our courses have remained to be either hybrid or face-to-face. So we have really moved our classes and our student service delivery and our work to virtual. Folks will be able to continue to work from home, how do I schedule? If we bring people back to the classroom, what does that mean for the library? What does it mean for the student support services? I mean, this ongoing, I can show you the list that we asked the presidents to send to frame the conversation, to reduce anxiety, which is part of the work that we need to do. But I think we all continue to be surprised that after, in the case of New York, almost a year of dealing with this pandemic, there's not a more clear road map to what the fall is going to look like, right? And that's very difficult with added pressures. I mean, we're gonna do some surveys. Our sense is that from our consumer base, that many of our students would like to have as much in person as possible. I mean, some might still continue to feel unsafe, and there's some for whom the online modality have been a dream come true in terms of their comfort and how they learn. A larger group, not so much, right? But and a lot of anxiety on the faculty side, on the staff side, about being able to come back safely, for example, right? And then the variations. I mean, both Peter and LaVerne mentioned how big we are. It is a more daunting and complicated task for the president of Baruch College, which is one of our four-year schools in Manhattan, that is a tower, a vertical building, to navigate issues of social distancing and mask to schedule courses, right? That depend on elevators, that it is for my successor at Queens College, which is a more traditional campus, flatter, buildings have, 3-4 floors, to be able to do some of that scheduling, right? It depends on technology. Can you do high flex? So there's all these questions, and you would think that a year into this we'll have more certainty. And I am a board member of the American Council of Education. I mean, a number of other national groups, and these are questions that everybody's tackling with. Maybe really elite universities that have a lot of money to, in terms of testing and other things that they might need, might have a better roadmap about what the fall is. But for the most part, everybody. So we're trying to get a sense of what students, faculty, and staff want. We're going to be rolling out some surveys to be able to gauge that as we try to plan for what I think is going to be a flexible fall with as much in person as we can do safely. And I think there's going to be some variation from campus to campus on that because of their physical constraints, if nothing else, and the kinds of courses that they teach. Continue to provide support for the students in terms of laptops and Wi-Fi's for those for the continuation of the online. We also felt that the movement to online allows to have a much more robust experience with that mode of teaching, and we think that there's some value in that, and we would like to continue with some of that footprint to add, flexibility to our students, and for the students who feel more comfortable learning in that modality. So a lot of questions about that shape. We're very I mean, we're concerned about the students that might have fallen off the tracks, that were maybe not the best online learners in this year that we've had to be mostly online. How do we bring them back? How do we support them and keep their academic momentum? We're also concerned about, you mentioned the fact that a majority of our students comes from the DOE. What are the implications of those students now, 2 classes now that have been mostly remote in terms of their own learning and their own experiences and their readiness to do the kind of work that they need to do at CUNY, right? So trying to figure that out and having conversations with our partners in the DOE to be able to do that. So again, I could go on and on, but that gives you hopefully a flavor of what still continues to be a lot of doing the best at getting new information and adapting quickly to do things in a safe way, but also keeping academic momentum.
Terrific. Yes, it's definitely a complex situation, and let's dive in a little bit to where you just left off, Chancellor. Thinking about many of the folks on the phone are concerned with the high school to post-secondary transition space. And if we focus in on New York City, we know you have a number of relationships and partnerships with community-based organizations, with the DOE, as you noted. Couple of things. One, what are you seeing? You mentioned the 2 classes that are mostly remote, but just take one step back and remind us, where are you in terms of students matriculating in these 2 years as you see it? And also, as you look at what support they need, given the mostly remote environment, how are you thinking about and working with the DOE and CBOs to ensure that as many students as possible are able to matriculate, especially if they were on a path to do so already? And what supports are you having to provide them in addition to those that you are already providing as a result of the pandemic?
So thank you for that. So I think that is a combination of things that we have been doing that we think have been successful, and we hope that we can continue to scale them up. We have a partnership that began with the with the DOE to have some of our graduates, our current students, serve as mentors to students who are transitioning from the DOE. That program got expanded this summer with support from P3, Bloomberg, and some others to do that. Very satisfied with the results in terms of both the engagement of the students who persisted, right, and stayed and sort of fought the so-called summer melt. And we all know that those peer experiences usually translate into self-esteem, better self-esteem and retention of students, building up networks on both ends, which is equally valuable, and something that I'm always a shameless advocate for, pocketing money in the pocket of my students, right? Because they were provided with a fee to be able to do this, and given the profile of our students, that is always an important part of how they get to navigate their food insecurity issues and some of the other things. So I think that is a program that we're probably going to continue to ramp up. I think this summer we're going to be playing some additional work on that front, and we're having a conversation also with the DOE about what they're learning from the students, so that we can, I think the summer is going to be a key time to provide interventions. The challenge logistically, right, is that the public health conditions limit what you can do. And if the students are doing poorly online, and you want to translate that into programs that have more face-to-face or a hybrid, you need to do it cautiously, right? In terms of, and you have to have added cost. You need to increase testing to be able to make sure that people are safe. If you're doing social distancing, that means that a classroom where you had 40, you can only have 20. So you have to have double. So the issue of cost to be able to deal safely with the students that might have fallen behind is a complicated one, because the you know, I mean, we might be in a better place with more vaccines and things like that in the summer, but the logistics continue to be a challenge, and they continue to be a challenge also for the CBOs that we work with in terms of their own employees, the capacity to do programs. I mean, some of the things that was very special about those community-based organizations was that face-to-face and that contact. I mean, that has changed. So it's an evolving landscape, but you know, we are having the conversations because we also feel that the summer is going to be a key time for a number of interventions, some that we're scaling up based on things that we've done already, and some that might be new, right? Based on what we are getting in terms of the feedback from the DOE. On our side, we're thinking about, I mean, maybe we're playing with something about some incentive for summer courses, some discount for summer courses for students that have lost, you know, their some of their courses. But again, if most of those courses are still online, and part of the reason why you fell off the track was because that was not your cup of tea, right? That might not be the best kind of intervention. What can we do for those? Do we create some separate program that is more face-to-face to be able to face them? Those are all things that are work in progress, right? Our academic affairs team is, and the group that works with the DOE is engaged in those conversations as we speak.
And just so thank you for that. And as you think about the progress, and you've noted we're a year in and don't really have a roadmap, let me just dig into that maybe a little bit more and ask you, what would you just highlighted a number of the things that you think we could potentially do or you're considering doing. What do you wish would happen more in the ecosystem of stakeholders and actors in New York City that would better, would create a better system or create that roadmap that you're talking about that we're missing? And if you think about, is there a role that you see there for philanthropy, for example, in contributing to supporting, creating a better network that would lead to the roadmap?
So, I mean, it's a great question. And I mean, a couple of thoughts come my way, right? So there are things that I think will continue to be with us, if not the fall, for the fall and the spring. And one is, if particularly if the rollout of vaccine continues to be, not optimal, and you keep having these new variants, in which is going to be also doubt about the effectiveness of the vaccine, the issue of testing becomes, and as mundane as that might seem, indispensable for being able to have any kind of more face-to-face contact and presence on the campuses. And that's something that we have not received sort of like funding from the state and the city. We rely on partnerships and being virtual as allowed. If we had to scale that up, I don't think that we have the resources that I've seen in other university systems available for that very basic thing, right? The other component is better use of hybrid and flex technology so that we have a better mix of use of, online and in-presence teaching and the training that we need to go for my faculty to be able to do that effectively, and the tech support, which in most of our campuses tends to be fairly thin, to be, as someone who's been president of 2 campuses can attest. That might be key, and we're actually doing an inventory of some of those things right now to see whether this high flex model, right, allows you and to think about that also with issues of equity, right? In terms of if you have classrooms in which people spend their time coming and going, what's the right way to do that in terms of who gets the seat time and when? I also think that these are good investments in what we're going to look like in the future will be, right? So I think that there'll be smart things to continue to do in a post-pandemic world, and again with better information about how students learn best, and then which one of these modalities are the ones that that we have available for them. In my view, as I told many people, the post-pandemic world we one in which we'll have a better balanced menu that we had in the past of face-to-face, hybrid, online courses, and then fellow the student based on how I learn best, that moment in my life. Am I working? Am I an adult? Do I live far away from campus? All the different things, right, that affect. I have the best menu available of options to take the courses, right? If I'm somebody who's returning and I'm just eager for that face-to-face, then we have a menu for you, and then you do that. If you need the flexibility of more online and hybrid. So I think that those investments are going to be really, really important. And then, some money, which is challenging, right? Because with so much need, we want to focus on the service delivery, but also we're going to need some investment in assessment, right? Which is technically not so sexy, but as we put these things, we need to know how effective we are in that teaching, and then use corrective mechanisms once we learn that. So I think those are some of the things that immediately come to my mind in terms of support, and again, with a very challenged state and city in terms of their own capacity to provide resources to us. That's going to mean that some things that for some folks that might seem very basic, right, for us are going to be even more important, because we just don't have the resources to do it.
Thank you. As you're thinking about, a number of the funders on the call focus specifically on persistence, and you've already highlighted a number of the challenges and opportunities, things you might be able to do to increase the capacity of students to persist. As you look at the number of students that you typically have transitioning from their community college to BA programs, are you starting to see any shifts there? And then I'll just feed one more extension of that, which is trying to we would love to understand a little bit more, not only about what you're seeing in that regard, but also for those students who may typically be making that transition to the workforce. How are you seeing that, given the economic crisis? What is the impact that's having on your students and your programs, and that sort of post-secondary pathway transition to either BA or workforce?
So let me begin with the last question, and if I stay too focused on that, politely remind me that it was the first question, and lead me there. As some of you who know me, I had the chance to talk to, the issue of career engagement, connection to the world of work, I felt that it was one of my key priorities coming as chancellor. I think CUNY and the data is out there, that social mobility engine has been formidable, imperfect, with many things to improve. No disagreement there. But the access and academic excellence formula has worked well for CUNY and for our students for decades. The part where we have been a lot more uneven has been on that career engagement side. And I'm convinced that if we actually ramp that up and consistently as a system do a better job there, that triangle of success we're going to get will be even more formidable, right? When you have 45% of your students being first generation college, right? And I'm going to use a metaphor that might work for half of the room here. You know, we have the responsibility of being the Rolodex for that student. I mean, I guess now it's to be the LinkedIn, right, of that student, to connect them to the networks and the world of work, right? Many of them do not have that, or they come from work experience that doesn't lead to really a lot of really great outcomes down the line. So for me, it was something that I wanted to be focused on early on, and candidly wanted to be one of the things that become legacy, right? In terms of investments in a more uniform way in the system. The pandemic has only exacerbated, right, the need for that. And actually, we've been getting incredible response from the employer community, right, in terms of coming to us and looking for opportunities to partner. Some because of the downturn in the economy, the whole theme of racial injustice, right, and sort of the business community trying to become more diversified and dealing with issues of racial equity. Clearly, we are the partner at scale for that matter, for anybody in the metro region, right? I was in a reunion with some classmates, and I told them, I said, there are 1.5 as many people of color in Borough of Manhattan Community College as there are in the entire Ivy League, right? In terms of a pipeline for a diverse workforce. So we've ramped up our efforts there. We did an upskilling challenge, and again, with support with some of the folks here to support the students who are graduating last year, second highest number of graduates in the history of CUNY. So we continue to produce graduate students, and the graduation rates are going up, but facing a really messed up labor market, and the ones who graduated this year. So we're trying to be very intentional about supporting them in their soft skills, in their thinking and their strategy to be able to move to the world of work. A partnership that was emerging, the partnership that was led by Jamie Dimon and the with the 27 largest companies in New York, or some of them, to create a CEO Jobs Council and have a special partnership with CUNY, also is another way in which we hope to learn to work differently with employers. And just to give an example there, the first thing we did there is some micro credentials, 600 students, cybersecurity, data analytics, software engineering, project management, feedback directly from the employers, curriculum created with them, students line up beginning in September to take the classes, and now creating a pipeline of potential internship and employment there. And taking the blueprint of that curriculum that's already created to then continue to replicate with other students down the line. So we want to continue to do this. We have them in many sectors. The financial sector, Centerbridge has been a key partner in creating a whole cohort. I can go by industry, right? And it goes to culture. Funding from the Mellon Foundation to expand our culture, our CUNY culture course, which is a key sector of the economy in New York, of internships there. So we're putting a lot of attention there in that area. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of unevenness in our campuses as to how all those services are staffed. We also need to figure out the right chemistry between things that become centralized, where the business community will come through the central office, and then what is the right role for the campuses in the regional capacity. But that is an area that we were focused before the pandemic, and we've made, I think, I can tell you, the publishing industry, the sports industry with the Yankees. I can just go down a list of folks that have knocked on our doors to, and now we need to just make sure that those investments become sustained.
Thank you. I know we're getting close to the time where we want to open it up to others. I know you testified recently in Albany. Is there anything you would like to share with us with respect to that experience and with respect to support for CUNY?
Well, it was so much nicer to do that via Zoom than to have the trek up to Albany that morning, see through the testimony, because CUNY goes second, so you also have to see through the testimony of the SUNY Chancellor, which would always taking notes to see what they're asking him or her, right? So that you can be ready for that. Listen, I think the good news is that there is a recognition of the unique role that CUNY can play in the recovery of New York City. And I've said that, and we need to step up our game to be able to do that. And I'm ready for the challenge in dealing with government, in dealing with the private sector. I'm committed to that. I think that message has resonated. Figuring the nuts and bolts of that, right? It's always the secrets in the details. I think there's a sense that additional support for CUNY is valuable. The elected officials get very frustrated because, they all have their bill in which more money for CUNY is going to come from taxing this and taxing that. And I tell them, I said, we're not in the business of telling Albany how they should get their revenue, right? That's not our job. Is to let you know what the vision is, why the return on investment in CUNY is formidable, and you should do it, right? And what kinds of programs that we have. We present that to you, and then you, senators, assembly members, and executive, you figure out how the revenue is going to play out, because we don't have expertise in that, and that's not our lane. And I know that frustrates many of them because they all want them for you to endorse whatever they're suggesting, right? And we thank them for designating and acknowledging that we need resources. And then the other part too that I'll say is that in this conversation with on topics like free college or free community college and all these labels, trying to get folks in the weeds a little bit is part of my role, right? As I was telling our student government leader, who's phenomenal, Giovanni, I said, well, remember, free tuition for you is a good thing, and I have no doubt that less economic worries will cause, an increase in our graduation and retention, right? But that's not a single dollar extra coming for all the things that we need to keep your education excellent, right? And if that's not part of the conversation, this is going to be a short-term victory with a lot of bitter flavor down the line, because the level of investment for the high quality needs to be there, right? So that was some of the engagement up in Albany. Actually, this is the highlight of my day. The rest of my afternoon, I am talking to elected officials. So but I do think that if the fiscal money is tight, at least the trade winds of acknowledging the role that we play and the need to invest are favorable.
Well, that's an inspiring note for us to open, I think, up for questions. In the questions you've already answered, I'm sure there's a lot that folks would be interested in following up on, or even new questions. So why don't we pivot? Thank you, Chancellor Rodriguez, for that engagement, and let's open it up for questions. Carrie, you want to help me facilitate?
Yep, happy to. And we don't have any questions added in the chat right now, so we can just go ahead.
I am that boring.
No, you're just that comprehensive in your responses to the questions already asked. I'm sure there are questions there, though. I'm preparing you for the afternoon of politicians you have to speak with.
Thank you. Thank you.
LaVerne, I'm not sure if we got to all the questions that folks had submitted ahead of time. We can also turn to those, or Happy if are folks able to unmute themselves if they have a question?
So let me, to warm it up, because I think LaVerne talked about the community college transfer to the 4 years. And I know that's a big interest here. So let me just add a couple of things there. Maybe I'll say something really silly and that would get people fired up. But the community college enrollment has been going down nationally. And for us, for the past 3-4 years, the last year was, that was the enrollment sector that in our landscape was really hit. If you look at our numbers for last year, the 4-year schools were basically flat. The graduate programs grew, and the community colleges were, and there seems to be some continuity to that pattern going into next year. And it could be that this is part of a new normal. This could be part of, the specific of New York City. So a number of things that we've been doing is we're looking deeply, and we had a partnership that was supported with in part with funding from somewhere here with Bain, and we looked at our applied associate's degree. CUNY, and I can say this because I was part of the system. In many other systems, that applied side is a lot more robust, gets a lot more attention. CUNY has always been a lot more transfer driven on the community college sector. I think that is something that needs to be changed, that we need to give additional value focus to a robust set of applied associate's degree. There's no such thing as terminal degrees anymore in this world of continuous learning. You do a good job, that so-called terminal associate's degree, those folks are going to be coming back for retooling and reskilling down the line at some point anyway, right? But because they were not transfer oriented, they were not emphasized. We are taking a hard look at all of them, trying to scrap the ones that don't have any value, right? There's no takers out there. There's no job for those things, and scaling up the ones where there's been robust enrollment and using this connection with employers to revamp the curricular, and then also break it down into a lot more micro credentials and badges. And that's a charge that I've given. Most of the community colleges have new presidents. So we have, I think, a new chance to reset that at CUNY. And I told them that it's part of the way that we need to respond to the economic crisis of the city. It's a different way to assess the work that we do in the community colleges, right? Not that we're not gonna work with the transfers and all of that, but I think that was an entire sector that we had neglected, and it was the wrong thing for the city. And we're making very conscious investments in changing that. Part of the new programs, for example, that we're looking with the CEO Council is a variation of those associate's degree with apprenticeship, right? So we're adding different things to that menu. So that's something that I'm very proud of in terms of a big change in the community college sector. We're getting rid of the remediation. I think that in a year and change, with a little delay because of the pandemic, is going to be co-curricular. So a lot of things, I think, and I hope that also will help with the enrollment side of the equation there.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yes, thank you.
Just
Go
noting,
ahead,
John has a question. John, are you able to unmute yourself? And oh, great, thanks.
Yeah, great. Hey, Chancellor, John Schnurr, advising Bloomberg Philanthropies. Great to see you.
Thank you, John.
Just want to, first of all, everyone knows this and you alluded to this, but you're very humble in this. But CUNY is, as you've mentioned, but is in some ways no greater institution for economic mobility in many ways in the country than CUNY. Your leadership, you've got a mission-driven leadership that's taking it to the next level. As you mentioned, Bloomberg Philanthropies invested in the College Bridge program. Part of the strategy you mentioned is a way of helping high school seniors. And people know the Opportunity Insight study that showed 6 out of the 10 institutions of higher ed in the country most driving economic mobility are part of CUNY. By the way, they recently have data showing that, maybe you'll have seen this, but it's really important. I think that graduates nationally, the class of 2020 from high school, are facing a lifetime earnings, career earnings impact, lifelong earnings impact, negative impact of $115,000 over their careers. It's a huge issue in terms of the issues for class of 2020, as LaVerne raised. You are taking an institution that's had like some challenges, but tremendous importance to the city. You're driving with effective leadership toward what's next. Two questions. One is, just as a leader, what are your hardest challenges to take your mission and drive toward performance to drive CUNY forward? And second, just what are the ways that the foundations? I mean, Bloomberg invested in the summer College Bridge program, and many foundations here are investing in CUNY. But what are your most important philanthropic priorities to help you and CUNY succeed in the years ahead?
So thank you for that, and thank you for the support. So I will say a couple of things. I think this cloud of uncertainty makes it very difficult for you to both have your aspirational hat, right? And then also know what the right balance of foot in the gas, which you need to keep on to make a system as big as ours change anything, right? And then fairness, right? To folks that have gone through a lot, right? And that's a value that's key to me. I mean, I am about, I have a unique opportunity in this service role that I have that I love. And it's about making change, right? But I mean, you also have to be aware of that navigation, because one way to undo change and one way is to not do it in a way in which you have people with as much buy-in as you can and not acknowledging some of their own situations that they're facing. So that as a leader for me has been a challenge. I mean, I'm sure it happens to all of you. Your teams are burned out, you're burned out, everybody's uncertain. So, you're always jumpy and edgy and concerned. It's difficult to plan ahead. Resources are tight. So I have that moment to navigate, right? But then also a call to a big challenge at a time of crisis in the city, in which we need to step up. One is just keeping the momentum, but now is the recovery in an equitable way of New York City, which is the bread and butter of what we do. And that has repercussions both. You were talking about lifelong, earnings and all of that into what they're going to be able to do, but it has implications day to day. Yeah. Most of the jobs that were wiped out by the pandemic caused recession is where my students have employment. Yeah. Right? So that's going to limit their chance to take advantage of the opportunities we provide today, not in lifelong earnings. I mean, it's going to do it also too. So we have both of this immediate help, and that's why, and for those of you who are there, sound like a broken record, but the whole component of internships, it's key to me. Is money in my students' pocket, right? And we have conversation with many of you on housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation insecurity, all of that, and it's social networks and the connection to the world of work, right? And good data that shows us that the students that participate in paid internships earn more when they graduate and more quickly get jobs, right? So I find that to be a very effective way to hit many problem areas at once in some way. So that's an area that I would like to focus. Your second question was, again, clearly, I've talked about the career engagement part. I'm also very interested in, and I know that we have, Cass here who was running our K-16 portfolio with great distinction before she got promoted to P3. But that is a portfolio that I'm actually having conversation with the team, because it is a very sizable portfolio at CUNY. Sometimes I think the rest of the system doesn't really understand that, right? It's part pipeline. I think there's a lot of, let me say something, don't quote me, I know this is being taped, so I'm going to be an issue, but in this whole conversation about the specialized schools Could our early college schools be a model of a place where there is rigor, excellence, diversity, and equation? Right? I haven't stuck my head there because that's, a really ugly debate. But again, so we're taking a look at that. I think some of you have heard me say too, and we were about to get a pilot done and the pandemic threw it away with the DOE. We could let students know earlier, maybe at the end of sophomore year, junior year, if they're really on track for college readiness. It's the data that we share. It's the data that I use when they come to my system, right? Is there a smarter way that we could signal that in a way that wouldn't make you feel bad, right? But that would allow for some interventions with seat time that is already paid by the DOE to address some of those things so that you come to college with a much more robust base, and it doesn't have to be done when you get to college, right? That is, for me, something that's been done in other states. That unique partnership of CUNY getting most of those students from DOE and having a single system is something I think we need to continue to leverage in increasing smart ways moving down the road.
Great.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thanks, John, for the questions. There's a question from Todd regarding the enrollment challenges. He's asking, are you seeing that decline more so from male low-income students? We're hearing that male student enrollment is being more negatively impacted, and curious if that's true at CUNY.
Absolutely true, and particularly African Americans and Latino males. Absolutely. We're very concerned about that. We just launched a new FAFSA page today, trying to leverage that. We've looked back at a number, and so many numbers in my mind, but a number of students that should have come from the DOE last fall to us that disappear. We're making an outreach effort to sort of try to bring them back now in the spring. Many of them are students of color and male. So that national trend is also affecting us.
And I know you just highlighted a couple of things that you're doing. Are there any other suggestions that you have for what can be done to support bringing those students in or back?
So there's two buckets there, right? Those are the ones that didn't quite make it to us or not making us to us, right? And some that we might have lost that were already our students. So with that, we have a strike force that's looking at that centrally from CUNY. We're also working closely with some of the programs like My Brother's Keepers and initiatives that were leading to have students of color at the end of K-12 that have come to our campuses to leverage that with some of the things that we already have. And also trying to get those kids to think about being in the teaching pipeline, right? Which is part of the shortage of teachers, and particularly teachers that come from diverse backgrounds, and they're also that male, right? If you keep slicing those categories. So, I mean, I'd be happy to, I know that Andrea Shapiro Davis and Glenda Grace, who are the people that make me look remotely formidable in these things, can also take some notes and get back to you on some of the things we're doing on those fronts.
Terrific. Chancellor, do you have a couple of more minutes? There are a couple more questions in chat, or I know we're getting close to your time.
Let me do, one of the drawbacks of the Zoom thing is that, you don't have your good old scheduler sort of knocking on your door, letting you know that the next meeting is coming up, right? So let me just look. Actually, I have as much time as you want to give me, because I also know that you have some business to attend, so I can stick around for a while.
Okay, I'll just take the questions that we have right now, and then we'll transition out. Cass, I think you had a question. If you want to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Philo, for the shout out earlier and for all the great work that you're doing. It's really great to hear you again in this setting. I think one of the things that you've talked about in other settings, and I wanted to make sure that we could highlight, or that you might want to highlight here as well, is sort of mental health supports for students as they're coming back, especially in the fall? I mean, currently we know that there's significant mental health issues the students are facing, but kind of what are you thinking about around that broad set of issues? And then perhaps, I think many folks on the line may be aware, but the opportunity for students to enroll in some public benefit programs is beginning to open up a little bit more. Things like SNAP are a little bit more open to college students. And do you have thoughts about how to help more CUNY students access public benefits in areas that they might be in need?
So thank you for that, Cass, and a couple of things. On the mental health, the services on our campuses prior to the pandemic were uneven is a polite way to say that we needed a lot more. And you can only imagine that with the pandemic, they've only increased. So, I mean, it was that important to me, just so that, you know, if you know CUNY politics, we actually, compared to a whole number of schools, have very low fees. The way that a lot of public schools hide tuition hikes is to put it under the fees, right? Which normally doesn't require a vote. CUNY has been, in that sense, very consistent with the students they serve. We have very, very low fees. And I put on the budget request a fee for mental health and student wellness because I felt that that revenue stream was so important and needed to be protected from the swings in our funding. It made me an incredibly unpopular person, right? But that's the nature of the beast. But I told the students, I'm doing it because I think that this is the only way I'm going to get direct money to invest in more counseling hours, more services, more mental telehealth, all the things that we have to have just more of on the campuses. And then, since it's a designated stream, if the mayor or somebody cuts the budget, that remains preserved. So it's a huge priority for me. We put some of the CARES Act money that we got on the first round directly on this, right? So I had the students angry at me because of the fees. I had my presidents angry at me because I took money that was designated to their schools so that we could buy some centralized services that provided scale and lower cost. But the message to the campus was more people for the students. We in our budget request to the state, we included part of that. If we don't get it, we're probably going to use some of the stimulus money to do that because it is absolutely indispensable that we have more of that. The SNAP thing, maybe of you, but you know, I was the Commissioner of Social Services for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So the SNAP thing hits close to the heart about making it easier for students to qualify. And I'm happy to say, and don't quote me, right? Because my good friend, the Chancellor from CUNY, you know, made the announcement about this mechanism that's going to allow 10,000 students to enroll in the future. When the things change, we already have 7,000 that we already did in the system that didn't know they qualify for SNAP, and we connected them with HRA. One of the things that we want to do is to increase our capacity in the central office to maximize those opportunities, have some people that can help at the higher level discussions, agency, HRA to CUNY to facilitate things, and then find ways to connect that to the growing work on food pantries in the system, services for students that are food insecure. You know, for example, we just did a food contract. First time we're going to have one single vendor for the entire system. We arm twisted them to put about $2 million into food insecurity with the students. Is a really huge priority. And the SNAP thing is a great way to be more effective. But we probably would need more support to be more efficient in making more students enroll and stay on top of that and deal with the bureaucracy at the central level. So thanks for the question, Cass.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question from Caroline. While presenting at the GFE conference last fall, Chancellor, you mentioned wanting CUNY to help with vaccine rollout in New York City, including, she says, if she recalls correctly, possibly hosting training a vaccine corps that could be leveraged from the allied health students. What is the role CUNY is playing or could play in vaccine distribution?
So we had about 7,000 of our students or volunteers right now in the different vaccine efforts in the city and the state. Very, very proud. We did a rollout probably a month ago when this whole thing began, and actually our CUNY First system allows us to sort of contact students individually and say, based on your profile, you're an upper level nursing or physician assistant student, right? We think that you can be helpful. And we're very proud that about 7,000 students immediately responded to that. So I think they're organized loosely, something the governor calls the New York City Excelsior, I forget the name, right? But they're organized that way. We are today, if they have not announced it, you're getting a preview. They're open vaccination sites at York and Medgar Evers in Queens and Brooklyn. We had offered the state 16 of our campuses to be sites for vaccines. So we are ready to roll. And we're actually going to be presenting a state a plan so that both the communities that we serve and the CUNY community can get vaccines. So we have already let the state and the city know that we are ready and able. I think the challenge has been that they don't have enough vaccines to go around, candidly, right? In terms of mobilizing things, but it's and when you think about the issues of doing this for communities of color, CUNY has, both the presence physically in many of those places, and also it's our students, is our employees. So we've been in conversation about that, and we have not done more because we're just really aligning with the state, waiting for the state to be able to have more vaccines to do that.
Right, and given your last point, I know one of the things she noted was helping with vaccine hesitancy, and I think it sounds like because it's your students and your employees in those communities of color, they may be able to, address some of the hesitancy around taking the vaccine.
That's. I mean, we assume that that's the case. There's nothing. I mean, and we've seen it, right? We had and we got support from some of you. Thank you also for the census.
Right.
We put, again, that model of the CUNY Census Corps, again, paid internships, students that speak all the languages, come from all those communities, all those places that were hard to count, hard to get. We have the expertise. We have the cultural, the ethnic, the racial, the credibility, and we want to put it to the service of New York City. So on the vaccine front, and I'm just really excited because somebody was saying, they added the comorbid, right? And high blood pressure made it to the list. So somebody says, how are you going to prove that? I'll say, I'll show my CUNY ID. It says Chancellor. Who's going to tell me that I don't have high blood pressure if I show that, right? I don't need no prescription to do that.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. And then Peter has a question. As the former president of both a community college and a state college, a senior college, what role can and should CUNY administration play in ensuring that credits earned at a CUNY community college receives major credits at CUNY senior colleges?
So I think that there's two things, right? One is breaking barriers that are artificially created at the four-year schools to keep those things from happening, right? And chipping at them all along. And then on the other side of the equation, right, is looking at the data. And when you have courses that the students that come from the two-year schools come from those courses and they underperform in the four-year schools, that you have the courage to signal them and correct that, right? Because that is the argument. The argument against doing something that is uniform is to say, I know that biology 101 course that's given at this place is not up to the standard. And the reality is that in most cases that's not true, but in some cases it is true, right? And we don't have enough. The people go this way, blaming each other, right? So when I was at Queens, and it should be ending now, we got a grant from money from as a Hispanic serving institution, STEM grant, and we actually were revising the curriculum for all the entry-level courses in bench sciences, right? With faculty from Queens College and our main feeder, Queensboro, making sure the curriculum was aligned. Right? So that did two things. That did the bureaucratic thing of there's alignment, there should be no issue with the transfer of credits, right? That's one big thing. The other part was trust among faculty that often don't work together, right? And when the folks at Queens, and I'm gonna say this, found out that oh my God, but the teacher here is my former student. You were awesome, right? Some of the unfortunate assumptions made about the quality of that teaching get also broken down, and you create then avenues for other kinds of partnerships. So I think that hard work of curriculum is important to do that. There are legacies of artificial barriers that also need to be stripped down there. But I think also we need to use data in the instances in which you do have evidence that there's certain courses that just the students don't do it well. You have to go back to the leaky pipeline and fix that. And I think that that's one thing where it's handy for me to have been at both places, right? Because then the presidents from the community colleges cannot say, oh, but you never sat on my chair. You don't know what it is, or you have all the prejudices of, right? And so I think that is something where, and we're trying to make some headway there. I mean, the pandemic has been tough in some of those partnerships, but and with the e-permit, that's another thing, another tool that is vastly underutilized in the system too, in that same direction.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Very last question, Chancellor, because we've asked you so many. The last question for you is basically, what's your wish list from us? What is it that the philanthropic community can do to better support CUNY?
Well, I mean, two things, and many of you here already do that, and that you're both supportive with dollars, but you're also great thought partners. And you push us to be better, and we appreciate that. As long as you let us know when we think you can be better too, right? But I mean, that's the best kind of partnership, and many of you here do that. I think that the work around career engagement, internships, connection to the world of work, revising curriculum so it's more aligned to that is huge. I think that, I mean, there was a question, for example, about College Now, and which is a big, important program. And we've been doing a lot more work there on career readiness and an early stage. We could also do more from that end about what I call the art of being a student, successful navigation in college, right? Which is equally important. So work with that pipeline in the K-16 to us. Investment there's are huge. The other thing, candidly, that and this is, you're getting a little bit of a preview. ASAP has been incredibly successful, replicated. Many of you have been part of the journey. We began also to look at what would be an equivalent in the four-year space. ACE has been one mix. We're looking, for example, at an experiment that we did at Queens when I was president. It was called QC in 4, which every student that entered the first-time freshman was guaranteed all their courses line up by senior year, assuming that they kept to a limited set of things, right? And the first class was this year's class, and depending on where we're in, it could be a 6 to 10% increase in the graduation rate. So we are also looking at some of the other things done in other campuses so that we can create a next generation of programs that have equally great results on the graduation, retention, and career success of the students, but then also that are real in terms of the funding models out there too, right? Which is the other part of the equation, which we feel is equally important. So additional partnership in that would be huge, and to listen, right? And when you don't know how to use your dollars, to come to us first.
Terrific. Can appreciate that. Can appreciate that response. Thank you so much, Chancellor Rodriguez. Peter, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, I tried a tough one on him, and he handled that as he always does, so professionally. So, Philo, you're doing extraordinary work. This is not an easy time to be in your shoes, and we all of us owe an extraordinary debt of gratitude to you. All of us work with people who benefit from the extraordinary work you do. So thanks.
Again, I'm blessed to be part of a great team, blessed to have folks like you, Peter, and all of you here who've been incredibly supportive. And like I said, not just with the dollars, but also asking hard questions, pushing us to be better. And I'll end, I'm actually coming to you live from my parents' house. Like some of you know that my dad passed away recently, and we're helping here mom, right? And my mom is one of those lovely, tough Latina women. Whenever I leave the room and I start complaining, she goes, "You applied for the job, right? You wanted to be chancellor. Just shut up and get the job done." So, I have some tough supporters here, but thank you for all you do. Stay safe. And again, my best wishes to all. Thank you for this opportunity.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Chancellor. We really appreciate it. Okay, Farhad, can't hear you. Farhad, can't hear you. All right, well, I know that what we were transitioning to was a debrief conversation